which has been more or less handed to us to develop as an arts centre. I have found the local authority very keen to develop that. I think there's a lot of push there from government to do so, and I think the role of national government is to ensure that local government is totally engaged with this, and that's where the need comes from. And I think local authorities do know they have to, and I think in East Lothian they are making big efforts, and she's of course a Lib Dem assembly coalition in East Lothian, and they're very at the moment, they're doing a routine. Good.
I think it does become a problem. I know, like in Edinburgh, we've had cuts to things like Voluntary Arts Scotland funding, and getting venues is quite difficult as well, and becomes much more expensive than it has become before. And I know from the work that I do, even getting a room to hire to have a meeting to help work to come along to, sometimes is prohibitive. For quite small organisations. I'm quite keen on what the SNP is wanting to do. I know that's the Scottish Socialist Party, but I'm quite keen on the idea that we're able to have community buyouts of buildings that are democratically run. And the organisation I'm involved in, the Edinburgh Old Town Development Trust, we're very keen to get the building at the end of this road, the Canongate venture, that actually members of the community saved from demolition. They had to go to UNESCO and ask them to come in and to help save part of the old town from really a dystopia, another husband over that. But actually the council's not keen on letting us get that, because one day a big developer might come along and save the day. And so it's that thing, like if it's a building that they want to develop, then they're keen on that, but less keen if the community wants to develop, they're against the economic policies and all that. So what I'm more interested in is more the democracy of decision making. And I think if I spoke to any of the councillors, whatever political party in Edinburgh, I think they'd all agree with me, the SNP, Liberal Democrat, and I work for the council, so I'm going to have to say this in a very reserved way, but I think sometimes council officials don't actually always sing the same song as the political leaders. And I think that is a problem about democracy. And I can say, I am a council, I'm not a council official, I'm a social worker, but if you know what I mean, it doesn't also, the economic person in the council might not be saying the same thing as the councillor, and the councillor from that political party doesn't say the same thing as the minister that might represent them. So I think it's more about democracy that I think we need to drill down and have a much more clearer conversation about, rather than just being cheap lets and all the rest of it.
Yes, and how to challenge that, yes, thank you.
It is well established fact that the Labour Party always has been very supportive of the voluntary sector. When we were in power in Lothian, East Lothian, Edinburgh, you can compare the funding, the facilities voluntary sector used to get from the council. You can compare now with the other parties in power. I think the facts speaks louder than promises or words. Thank you, George.
Yeah, I think that we need to lay down some statutory minimum requirements for arts provision by local authorities. One of the dangers when you have an economic crisis, or when the economy implodes as it did under Gordon Brown, is that local authorities make easy cuts, and the danger, for instance, that they'll cut the voluntary sector, which is madness, because actually the cheapest way, take this in the right, cheapest way of delivering services is through the voluntary sector. I'm not saying it's right on the voluntary sector, but I'm not putting it as much. But it always seems to be very, very peculiar that local authorities have a strange notion where they cut easily is in the voluntary sector, whereas actually where you should be putting more money in times of stress. I think if we are to put a little pressure on local councillors across the land, we might need to lay down some more statutory requirements for arts provision in line with statutory sports. Not delivered necessarily by professional companies, but in order to provide some kind of leverage for the voluntary arts sector to extract more support from so that would be my big idea on that. The SNP government removed a lot of the ring fencing of local government spending in 2007, which I thought was very brave. And actually, it's quite a revolution because for about 10 years we've been telling central government, telling local government how to spend its money, which had sucked away a lot of responsibility from local government. So I think it was brave. I think it was correct to try and push local government, give them the right to spend their money. But in order, when you do that, you then have to build up the political lobby to ensure that the money is spent in the ways that we would want to hear it through. I think that what we need to do over the next 5 years, the time of the economic slippage, is to ensure the arts bodies, professional and voluntary, come together to maintain the public pressure on the local authorities to keep the funding going. I think sometimes the professional arts are a little bit snippy in terms of the division between them and voluntary arts, and I think we should bring them together. As the Chair said at the beginning, 2 million people are involved in the arts in Scotland. What a lobby! You know, no politician stand up against that.
Can I just get a point of clarification? You seem to contradict yourself there, and that you thought...
How does that look?
Leave it, yes. I'm challenging you on that.
Good.
Because you said that, you know, under the SNP, councils are being given more freedom to make their own decisions, take away the ring fencing. But now you're saying the ring fencing should come back and say you must put that on up.
No, forgive me. No, I think it's always best, good difficult as well, that we should let local politicians and local voters decide how money is spent. But I think we need some national standard of what there should be, right? I think, my wife and we worked in Norway for the last 3 years. It's been fascinating going across the EU and seeing the smallest community has a publicly funded community arts space, and everything revolves around that. I think we need to lay down some broad ideas about what is the minimum level of artistic provision in a community, and tell the local authorities, you have to respond.
Oh, well, yes.
It's not saying that you must spend $50,000.
No,
it's a broad.
Anyway, but you want to, can we hear from you? We get stuck into that one. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, there's a few things before I come back on George and some contradictions. We want to be very much by what we want to renegotiate the whole relationship between the whole relationship and the role of the voluntary sector in the civic society, because we know what a massive part they play. We know how well the voluntary sector do. We know that they are often best placed, not just on value, because you can get cheaper as a private company can come in and do it cheaper, but when you look at the social return on investment, you add that in the voluntary sector, there's more than often the absolute best folks to be providing services. So therefore we want to introduce a right to bid to the voluntary sector so they can, in the third sector, so they can be coming in and doing services that currently within the public sector that we think the voluntary sector can do better. Society will get better return for the investment, and in the ability to boost the voluntary sector massively, encouraging the use of multi-year again is some of what I said in my introduction, because it comes down to that, encouraging and introducing multi-year deals so there's some security there, so it's not year on year, you're not having to spend time you could be spending on the arts, time you could be spending with young people, vulnerable people. You haven't spent chasing around after funding. You have to, I've got to look after next year's funding, I've got to start going through the redundancy process with my staff and not sure if the funding's going to run out this year or not. So you've got some security, you can concentrate on the funds that got you involved in the voluntary sector, that got you involved in the arts, not scrambling around going, where's my funding coming from, where's my funding coming from. So the multi-year funding will become the norm. Again, requiring the public body to report on what proportion of their contracts by value and percentage replace the third sector bodies, because we believe that will put pressure on them to actually be funding and giving these contracts out. If it's out there in the open, this is how much we're supporting the voluntary sector in Edinburgh, Glasgow, East Lothian, wherever, if that puts pressure on, because society in general values the voluntary sector and values that and says, okay, we want the voluntary sector to thrive and we want the first sector to thrive and we want it to be providing services because we know the values in that. Some of it is opening it up and that puts pressure on the councils to do it. So very much is renegotiating the power of the voluntary sector and the first sector to be carrying on, because there are very much choices. You know, in Edinburgh, because I'm an Edinburgh candidate, we'll talk about Edinburgh last year on the council. There's a couple of things. I'm going to take issue with George on a couple of things. One, in the introduction, he said the choice is a SNP government or a Labour government. Now, it looks incredibly likely that the SNP or Labour, because polling at the moment and in the last 3 elections, SNP or Labour have consistently been the biggest party in the Scottish Parliament. They've never, under the vote system, there will not be a party have a majority. So what we will see is one party, a couple of larger parties, and then you go, okay, who's got the balance of power? So in the first 2 elections, the Scottish Parliament ended up with a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition. There wasn't a Labour government, this was a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition. And under the current system, get the point, on the okay, first thing is the choice is not a Labour Liberal Democrat Labour or SNP government. Second thing is SNP supposed to the voluntary sector. In the City of Edinburgh Council, it made some strange bedfellows in the budget debate. The Labour Party, Conservative Party and the Green Party agreed a budget. And you know, Labour and the Conservatives have some different views on how things should be budgeted. The thing that made us able to join up a budget, propose a different budget to the Liberal Democrat SNP was our core belief that the voluntary sector shouldn't be getting cut. The budget for the voluntary sector should not be getting cut in the City of Edinburgh. We lost that one in the Lord's Provost cast and vote to the SNP. The Liberal Democrats who did cut the voluntary sector budget in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I'm going to get.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe the next.
Okay. Anybody want